Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a plant that, honestly, you might literally have sitting in your kitchen pantry right now. But we aren't just looking at it as a comforting hot drink to have on a chilly day. No, we're going to trace the deep, incredibly rich history of Rooibos, specifically focusing entirely on health, wellness, and the ancient indigenous science behind it.
So, I want you to start by asking yourself something. What if the secret to modern wellness has been brewing in the hot African sun for centuries? It's a pretty provocative question, right? You know, we so often look to high-tech modern labs for our health breakthroughs. But as we're about to see, one of the most powerful botanical remedies in the world was actually perfected way before written records even existed.
Okay, let's jump straight into Section 1, the origins of redbush, and the original custodians.
Picture this. Deep in the Cederberg Mountains, which is about 200 kilometers north of Cape Town, is this incredibly rugged, biodiverse region you're seeing here. This exact area is the ancestral homeland of the Khoe and San communities, and they are the undisputed original knowledge holders and custodians of the Rooibos plant. They lived side by side with this plant for centuries, long before any European settlers ever arrived.
But before we can really appreciate its healing properties, we've got to know exactly what it is we're talking about. The scientific name is Aspalathus linearis. Sounds super academic, right? But locally, it's just called Rooibos, which is Afrikaans for red bush. And here's a totally surprising fact for you. It's not actually a traditional tea plant at all. It's an indigenous fine-boughs shrub, basically a legume-like plant with these really fine, needle-like leaves. Yet, somehow, it's been harvested and processed into a healing beverage for generations. Which brings us right to Section 2, Khoe and San traditional healing and centuries of empirical medicine. Now, Rooibos wasn't just some casual, everyday drink for the Khoe and San. It was an incredibly versatile, multi-purpose medicinal solution. They used it to soothe digestive disorders and infantile colic. They'd use it to alleviate allergies and asthma. And even externally, they applied it to treat dermatological conditions like eczema and to soothe irritated skin. Depending entirely on how it was used, it could give you a natural energy boost during the day or completely dial down nervous tension and promote really deep, restorative sleep at night. It was literally a complete natural pharmacy.
Now, you might be wondering, how on earth did all this complex medical information survive without textbooks or medical journals up in those mountains centuries ago? Well, it survived through a powerful, enduring oral legacy. The knowledge of how to identify the right plant, exactly what ailments it could cure, and how to prepare it, all of that was passed down directly from generation to generation. And research actually shows that this profound knowledge was traditionally transferred through a maternal pattern, meaning it was passed down from mothers and grandmothers right to their children.
Moving on to Section 3, the art of harvesting and ancient preparation techniques. So, knowing about the plant was only half the battle, right? To actually unlock these cures, the Khoe and San developed a seriously physically demanding, labor-intensive preparation method. First off, they'd spend hours just hiking through these steep mountains to find the absolute best wild plants. Then they'd chop those fine needle-like leaves with axes. Next up was this really crucial bruising phase, where they literally crushed the plants using heavy stones. After that, they leave those bruised leaves in heaps to ferment, and finally, spread them all out to dry in the baking sun. Every single one of those deliberate steps was absolutely essential to creating the final remedy. And it's super fascinating to note that this specific fermentation step, leaving the bruised, wet leaves in heaps under that hot African sun, that is exactly what causes the plant to oxidize and turn into that rich, famous red color. It also completely transforms the flavor profile, giving traditional Rooibos the slightly sweet, floral, and woody undertones. Without this ancient indigenous technique, we literally wouldn't have the red bush tea the whole world knows today.
Which leads us to Section 4, global discovery and expansion as the world catches on.
Let's map out the timeline of its global expansion. We start way back in 1772, when a Swedish botanist named Carl Thunberg visited the Cape. He became the very first to formally record its use as a health beverage. But its commercial potential wasn't fully realized until 1904, when a Russian immigrant became totally fascinated by it and started actively trading it. Later, in the early 20th century, Dr. Lefras Nortier started digging into its medical and agricultural potential. But the massive global boom? That happened around 1947. During World War II, there were huge shortages of traditional Oriental tea, and that caused global demand for Rooibos to just absolutely skyrocket as an alternative.
But as we look at this massive global commercialization, we really have to recognize a fundamental historical truth. Early European settlers and missionaries didn't just magically discover Rooibos in a vacuum.
They merely adopted the local practices. The entire foundation of the modern Rooibos industry relied heavily on the existing indigenous knowledge that was generously shared by the Khoe and San. Put simply, the world only learned how to use it because the original custodians taught them.
Let's head into our final part, Section 5, Modern Wellness and Science and Validating Ancient Wisdom. Today, we're seeing a really fascinating modern divergence in how we process this plant. On the one hand, you have traditional red Rooibos, which goes through that ancient sun-fermentation process we talked about earlier. It's fantastic for soothing digestion and skin issues. But then you have green Rooibos. Green Rooibos skips the fermentation process entirely. The leaves stay unoxidized, and because it isn't fermented, it yields a significantly higher antioxidant profile.
Now, to really understand just how different these two are, look at this number, 90. Prepared to be a little surprised here. The traditional fermentation process used to make red Rooibos actually destroys up to 90% of Aspalathus, and Aspalathus is the main flavonoid responsible for the plant's powerful antioxidant properties. So, while the red tea is incredibly soothing and undeniably delicious, modern science is showing us that the unfermented green version is just an absolute powerhouse for antioxidants. But here's the crucial point. Whether you prefer the traditional red or the modern green, scientific labs are confirming exactly what the Khoe and San knew through observation for centuries. Modern research verifies that Rooibos is naturally caffeine-free and incredible at protecting the body against oxidative stress and inflammation. Systematic reviews even show it can help reduce the risk of cardiovascular diseases. And hey, remember how the Khoe and San used it for skin conditions like eczema? Well, today, Aspalathus-enriched green Rooibos extracts are highly sought after as bioactive cosmetic ingredients for advanced skincare. It's amazing how that ancient empirical science holds up perfectly under a modern microscope. As we start to wrap up this explainer, I want to share this really powerful quote from a natural justice traditional knowledge study. It states, "Knowledge of the use of the species is passed orally from generation to generation. One could conclude that Rooibos has been utilized by local communities for many generations." Honestly, it's a beautiful, formal recognition of a profound truth. This isn't just some trendy modern wellness drink. It is a vital piece of living African heritage.
So, I'll leave you with this final thought. Will the next cup of tea you drink be just a beverage or a tribute to centuries of indigenous healing wisdom? The next time you steep a cup of Rooibos, take a moment to really smell that sweet, woody aroma. Remember the harsh Cederberg mountains, the incredibly labor-intensive preparation of the past, and the brilliant, enduring legacy of the Khoe and San peoples resting right there in your mug. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today, and as always, keep learning.